may not look like a ski resort right now, but it is. On this side of the ridge, you'll find several chairlifts and a gondola. On the other side, you'll find one awesome view of the majestic Mount Rainier. Yes, indeed. And up on top, in between, there's a group of cell sites and a first responder network in need of a generator. The challenge is that up here, the power typically goes out from anywhere to 5 to 15 days total every winter. You want to have enough fuel on hand for that. So they've asked us to bring in a new generator and bury 2 1,000-gallon propane tanks so that they could get through the season. And Legacy Power stepped up to the plate. We brought in a couple of excavators, one with a bucket and one with a jackhammer attached, commonly called a breaker, and Justin and Jay drove those slowly up the winding mountain road that leads to the top. It's about a 2-hour drive in one of these with 4 hairpin turns along the way, but they both made it just fine. So we marked the spot for the tanks and had Jay drive the breaker up the hill to start digging the trench we'll need for the pipes that will carry the fuel up to the shelter where the generator will live, busting up rocks as needed. The following day, the breaker alternates with the excavator, carving out a nice big hole for the fuel tanks and creating a nice pile of rocks. Still not quite as cool as that pile of rocks in the background. And since this is a very special spot, you can't just push the rocks over to the side. You need to truck them down to the rock and sand pit down at the bottom. But no ordinary dump truck can make it up and down that road, so we brought in a special one with tracks on it. Say hello to the Panther. It has a pretty small load capacity though, so that meant lots of trips. Get it up to the top, load it with rocks, drive it down and dump those, and then on the way back up, we bring up a load of sand. And here's some of that sand going into the hole we made for the tanks. It's going to make a nice place for them to land and provide some draining. But next we had to find a way to get the tanks up here. And the Panther got the call again. We built a wooden cradle for each of the tanks to sit on. Yes, we had to make 2 trips. And after we strapped the tank down tight, we headed up the long and winding road up the mountain, with the truck following to keep an eye on the load. And once we got to the top, we got the tank rigged, and then Justin lifted it up and over and set it down into the hole. You can see both of them in there now. Then we piled on yet another load of rocks and gave the Panther some fuel so it could keep on going. Then came the day for bringing up the star of the show, the generator itself. It arrived all gift-wrapped on a trailer, and we were able to get it lifted up and over onto the Panther, where it just fit. Then Jake drove it back up to the top, with Justin following in the truck to keep an eye on the load. Once we got up to the top, we lifted it off and set it down so that we could get the handler's forks underneath it, and we unwrapped our present. But it's going to take all the reach this rig has to get the generator up to the shelter. Dean grabs the controls and starts to stretch it out. He gets it lined up with the opening in the shelter, and then Jake and Justin get a couple of ratchet straps going, and inch by inch, they start to pull the 2,000-pound generator off of the forks and into the shelter. There was a moment of celebration, but there's still more to do to get it hooked up and properly ventilated. And then the seasons changed. The snow started, and that threw a wrench into the plans. So the plans were altered to use a smaller ventilation system. We were able to get the parts up on the ski lift. Then we needed to cut a hole in the wall at one end of the shelter, like this. The new vent was a perfect fit. Then we cut another hole in the side of the shelter, like this. The vent was lifted into place and secured to the wall. And the next day, a cowling was added to connect the generator's radiator to the new vent, sending the hot air outside. So here it is, all hooked up and ready to keep this area on the air. Score another one for Team Legacy.